So I'm hoping that it will take us a while to get through the minutes and stuff. All minutes?
Public
Oh,
comment.
excuse me, public comment. Maybe that will take some time and the other two can appear. Excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry, I'll try to speak up. These aren't actually microphones. These, oh, they connect to the FCTV thing, I was told, rather than actually amplify the speakers' voices. They do both? Does that work better? Okay, live and learn. So, this is time for public comment. If there's something you would like to tell the board that is not on the agenda, this is the time that you can speak on any subject to do with planning or zoning. And if you plan to do that, or to speak later in the meeting, please come to the podium and use that microphone, because that is connected to FCTV. There are, I think, 4 cameras around the room, and you need to be over there in order to be included in that. So is there anyone who would like to speak on something that's not on the agenda?
Hey, John.
No. Okay. Paul, minutes?
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the minutes of January 24th, 2023 as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So that's enough. 5. We're not expecting Mr. Fox tonight, and we've got one member we are expecting who isn't here. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing from Commissioner Edward Foley Vaughn Esquire and Todd Brain Jr., trustees of OBR Realty Trust. They have a definitive plan application to subdivide a 10.3-acre parcel of land into 2 buildable lots and 1 non-buildable lot at 336 Old Barnstable Road in East Falmouth, lots 2 to 6 Adeline Way. Who will be speaking for this?
Hi, good evening, Madam Chairman.
Paul has notices.
Oh, do you have notices for this? Yeah.
Excuse me. Notice of the public hearing was published on 1/27 and 2/3, and 31 abutters were notified by regular mail.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. My name is Brian Wall. I'm an attorney in Sandwich. I will try. I'm not used to these public hearings anymore. I'm used to sitting in front of my computer. Let me start over. Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. My name is Brian Wall. I'm an attorney. I have an office in Sandwich, and I'm here tonight with Mike Borselli of Falmouth Engineering, who will address the technical aspects of the project. And I'm representing the applicant, Todd Rainey, trustee of the OBR Realty Trust. And I'm also standing here tonight acting as authorized agent for Commissioner Edward Foley Vaughn. And if I can just explain, it's not really relevant to your application, but I'm sure you're curious as to why there's such a lengthy name of an applicant. This particular property is owned by multiple family members, and the family members are involved in a disagreement as to what to do about the property. And since they could not agree on what to do, one of the family members filed what's called a petition to partition and submitted the land to the jurisdiction of the land court. And Mr. Foley, with his title commissioner, is actually in legal authority and in charge of the property. And my client, Todd Rainey, is the one that's seeking to have this subdivision approved. But I think what's important for the board to know is the combination of the two, Commissioner Foley and Mr. Rainey together, have authority to submit this application to the board. So having said all of that by way of background, what's before you tonight is a plan, a definitive plan to subdivide technically 2 lots. There's going to be 4 in total. 2 of them have already been approved through the A&R process, and tonight we're asking for definitive approval of the other 2 lots. And this plan has already gone through a preliminary approval process, and Mr. Borselli will tell you that we've made a few changes to reflect comments that we received from the board through that preliminary process. And I think with that, if I could turn it over to Mr. Borselli to tell you a little bit about the plans.
Mr. Borselli, I remember when this was here before. That's not that long ago.
That's true. For the record, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. We have been before you on 2 occasions. We filed a preliminary subdivision, got your feedback on input, and we had subsequently filed an A&R plan to create 2 lots that already have frontage on Old Barnstable Road. So we incorporated the town planner at the time, Tom Bott's, comments and feedback from you folks, and we proceeded on to the definitive. So subsequent to filing the definitive, you've received a staff report from your planning staff, but also a staff report or a report or referral from the engineering department through staff engineer Scott Schluter. And a few comments within that staff report are going to require, and we've initiated the process, are going to require us to hire an outside consultant because this project triggers your more involved stormwater management regulations. In September of '21, stormwater management regulations were adopted, and if an acre or more of land is altered and that's defined, you need to do more advanced stormwater management. That requires a consultant through, we don't have the technical expertise to do some of the calculations and things, so we've reached out to a consultant we have worked with in the past, and he's in the process of doing his work. So we're gonna present the plan, but we're going to be requesting a continuance so he can do his work, and we can address some of the staff report comments and the town engineering department's comments, but we also, of course, want your feedback, so we thought it, in your planning staff wanted the hearing open so we could like present to you, and then we'll be asking for a continuance. So, the subdivision is proposing to create 2 additional lots where currently 2 exist with frontage on Old Barnstable Road. So if you make reference to your plan, Lot 1, which already has a house on it, and Lot 2 are already in effect lots that would qualify to apply for building permits. Behind them are 2 more lots that don't have frontage on Old Barnstable, so Adeline's Way would be created to create the frontage for access, and then we also are demonstrating we have adequate lot width and lot area. Then there's some remaining land to the back that is surplus land that is not a building lot. The land is in a zoning district, AGA, I believe, and the minimum lot size is 45,000 square feet. So the minimum frontage is 60 feet when on a cul-de-sac, and the minimum lot width is 150 feet. So the lots all meet the dimensional requirements. There's a road profile that would accompany this. Is that with this? Yep. And this shows the actual road construction. It'll be to the standards of your subdivision regulations as far as width, alignment, and grade. There is already in existence an 8-inch water main. Because if you look, if you recall, previous to this definitive subdivision application, Adeline's Way already exists as a paper road. It was actually approved some time ago as a planned residential development, meaning it had smaller lots with open space. This is a traditional definitive subdivision plan where there's no open space and all the lots must meet the minimum zoning requirements. But the road, in effect, is in the same location. It has a cul-de-sac that meets your standards for radii going around, the pavement width. We've incorporated all of the typical details and specifications that we routinely incorporate, and others that we've learned to incorporate over the past couple of subdivisions I've done over the last 2, 3, 4 years. But I had an initial meeting with Scott Schluter from the engineering department, and he has some other things that are outlined. He went paragraph by paragraph through section 305
Yeah.
of your regs, which are the rules. So we have to address those. Most of them are basic and simple notes, additions. I don't think there was anything in his report that we can't deal with, but we do have to deal with it. So we can't, we thought it would be best to open up the hearing, get additional feedback from you. We will make all those plan revisions at the same time while we wait for the stormwater management process and calculations to happen, which will most definitely result in a change to the size of the drainage that we propose, because we designed it in accordance with the more standard stormwater requirements that were in place prior to September of '21. So this is a pretty typical, straightforward subdivision with a short cul-de-sac road. And we're both here to get your feedback, and then we'll be asking for a continuance, and we'll come back with edited plans.
Sounds good. Let's hear from the public first. If there's anyone in the public who'd like to comment on this plan. Could you come one at a time, and when you come, could you please give your name and whether you're speaking in favor or against this proposal?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Sherry Bonner. I'm the chair of the Fairway Meadows Condo Trust. We bank the entire side of that. The top portion of that entire area is our condominiums along that runway. So we're an abutting neighbor to that plan. Our main concerns in this was that we're under the impression, and we have been for years, that, and it was mentioned in here, that this was at one point a landfill. And it has some concern, it's had concerns with us for years that it is a landfill, and because it's been untouched, it hasn't bothered us, but now it's being touched. So I think our concerns are that it mentions in here that that back portion is not buildable at this time, but that they're looking to remediate or cap that in the future, and that's the reason they're building this, is to get funds to be able to take care of that problem in the back. So we're a little concerned about that and the effect that may have on us as a full abutting neighbor. And we are a full abutting neighbor to this entire portion of land. So, I mean, that's a concern that we wanted to bring to the planning board, definitely. And also, I don't think we're quite sure what is being built here. Is this housing that's going here, or is that not determined at this time?
Do you want to comment that they're planned for houses?
Houses, like residential housing, not anything, not
As
commercial.
I understand it, yes.
It's not commercial, it's residential housing. So approximately how much housing do we know how many, based on that lot size, what we would be talking for housing?
So these are residential building lots, and they're intended to support single-family dwellings, one house on each lot. The Lot 1 and 2, well, Lot 1 already has a house on it.
Right.
Lot 2 does not need any further action from the planning board. They could apply for a building permit now and build a house on this one. So basically, we're looking at creating 2 additional lots, which would, the purpose of which would be to have one house on each lot, nothing beyond that.
Thank you.
Mike, did you, while you're there, do you want to comment on the landfill question?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just move this. I just want to, there, I think I got it here. So this area here that's marked with these kind of semicircle lines is an area that was used as an illegal dump by a prior family member. The dump is for lack of a better word, under an order from the DEP to either be capped or cleaned up, as in the fill that was put in there be removed. The client has the option to do one or the other. It's already all decided by the DEP, and experts will oversee that. That is one of the reasons why we're seeking this subdivision, is to create a funding mechanism to take care of this problem. And if you look on the plan right here, there's an easement being proposed. It's not really relevant to your jurisdiction or your review, but the plan is to have an easement here so that when the subdivision is built and the lots are sold and money is generated, there can be access to the back lot to then clean up that landfill either by removing everything or by capping it.
Thank you. A secondary concern we had, again, as a full abutter, is making sure that this area is surveyed and there's no infringement. We don't know if there's been a full survey or a marking of the land between our property and where that ends and where this will begin, to make sure there's no infringement on our property line. Is that the responsibility of this group, or is that the responsibility of Fairway Meadows to make sure we're not
So this group-
infringed upon?
Ted, do you want to comment on that?
Well, the plan that you're looking at right now is, I believe, stamped by a surveyor. It would be up to the board if you want to visit the site and have it staked to determine the lots, but that's a question for the board.
I think our only concern, again, is to make sure that there's a clear delineation between our property and this property, and that we have as an abutter, a full abutter of this property, that our land is not infringed upon. That's all our concern is. And hopefully, there's a buffer that we're not in the backyard of somebody's home. That's mainly what our concern is. Thank you.
You're welcome. May I say to you, if you don't need to look them up, but there's a requirement, the bylaws provide for setbacks for houses and so forth.
Yes.
So that there would be a buffer.
Right.
You know, not everyone would think it's adequate, but the thought is there. So they're there, and there's a requirement that a certified land surveyor produce the plans and stamp them and be responsible for them, and that's already happened.
Okay.
I don't know that boundaries were put in. Were the monuments put in?
I was just going to speak to that.
Yeah.
Your regulations require the developer to set concrete markers on each property line, so it will be, it's a requirement, and ultimately it will be marked.
Will be, but isn't yet.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Someone else raised her hand?
It was me, but, Good evening, my name's Monica Quinn, I'm an owner at Fairway Meadows. I just wanted to reiterate a bit, I'm not sure everyone on the condominium is aware of, we know the back part is what you're working on, that has been sort of, we've been told, sort of contaminated. We have not seen any paperwork yet. Is that all been cleared, the whole front part where you're building?
Excuse me, you can't, the rules here, you have to speak to us.
Sorry. Is that all been cleared, that there's no contamination in any of the land that they're now going to be building on?
Now then, Mike or Mr. Wall, whichever.
So the area where there was landfill is at the back.
Correct, I'm
Yep,
aware of that.
Yep, and the road that will be created is, there's no landfill, and these lots where houses will be built, there's no known landfill material from our observations.
They weren't used as part of the landfill.
No, in fact, there was a analysis done of all this, so that was studied, and there was no evidence of anything in the reporting that was done when it was discovered way back when that was. So the lots where the houses will be, and the area where the road will be built, and the area where the utilities will be installed are all in areas where there's no landfill.
There's no contamination there.
Right.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak about this plan or ask a question? Okay, from the board. Paul?
Mr. Wall, you mentioned that the option to either cap this landfill or remove the material is up to the DPW with the owner. Is that 20-foot easement satisfactory for removing that material if necessary?
I believe that it is because the
I
anticipation.
don't know what's in there, it may be a lot of large.
Oh, no,
items.
they do. They took samples and they have an idea of the type of material that's in there. In fact, I don't want to speak for Mr. Barcelli, so if I say something beyond what you're comfortable with, let me know. The semicircles that are shown on this plan here are an approximation that Mr. Barcelli took from a plan that was prepared by the consultant that the DEP required the property owner to hire and to analyze the landfill and to come up with a plan to address the landfill. And so these lines here are the approximate perimeter of the landfill. And there's an entire report I have in my file that's about this fat with regard to what's in there and what kind of compounds are there, et cetera. And the solution that was arrived at was to either cap it so that liquid does not infiltrate that, or to remove all the material. And there's what's called a consent order that's been issued by the DEP, many years ago, actually, but they were unable to do it because of lack of funds. So the idea is that this subdivision hopefully will be approved, the lots will be sold, and then the funds will be used to address the landfill. And the easement is sufficient to have the types of trucks that are anticipated, like a 10-wheel dump truck to get in and out of there.
Okay, thank you. When I was out there on a site visit, the owner of the property in front seemed to indicate there was an easement on the south side of the property. Is that incorrect?
I think there's an existing, was there an existing easement there, Mike? Yeah,
It's not shown in the drawing, that's why I asked.
Yeah,
The surveyor would be required to show all the easements.
Well, he may be mistaken.
I will have to look at that and make sure that we comply with your requirements if there is something there. There might have been a little bit of confusion when we came before you on the preliminary plan. The cul-de-sac was in a slightly different configuration. The road went up and then took a 90-degree turn. And so I think that is what he was talking about. We previously proposed the easement over here, but now we're proposing it here because it makes more sense.
Well, the property on the south side has become a dump, unfortunately. But that's a different issue.
Okay, yeah.
The third question, last question, Adeline's Lane is pretty overgrown because it's just a walking path at the present time. Then it meanders all the way in the back. Obviously, that's all going to be cleared to be able to have access to those two new lots. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. Adeline's Way, as shown on the plan, presuming the board approves the project, will be built as an asphalt road with drainage and all to your standards.
The reason I said there is no existing site plan of that area, it just shows what's proposed.
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Yeah.
There-
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so you've got Lot 1 and lots C and D that are yet to be sold, is that correct?
Lot 1, I believe,
I'm sorry, Lot 2, I should have said, I misspoke.
right, Lot 1, I think, was sold.
Yeah,
But Lot 2 has not been, and obviously lots D and C don't yet exist, so clearly they're not sold
right.
yet.
But my question, just eliciting that there are 3 lots yet to be sold,
Right.
and the applicant has that money alone, I'm assuming, to pave Adeline's Way and to determine how they wish to handle the landfill, whether it is to excavate or to cap it. I kind of know what cleanup charges run. They're very high. What if that is not sufficient money to, and also paving is quite expensive too. What if that does not garner sufficient money to do what the DEP wants done? I don't know if you know the answer.
Well, I don't really know the answer to that because I don't know what the math, I don't, the DEP order, I have it here with me, but it's several years old, as in maybe 10. And so I don't think that my client has a current cost estimate for the cleanup process. The idea would be to sell the lots to generate the money. The order that I'm referring to is an enforceable order that the DEP has the right to enforce. It's kind of a question of, you can't force someone without the money, though. So I can't really answer your question any more than that the whole idea here is to generate the funds to clean up the mess.
Bob?
Well, that comes to my question about an enforcement agency. I mean, okay, say the lots are all sold, and, you know, they decide, okay, you start building houses, and that lot that needs to be cleaned up just doesn't get cleaned up. Who makes sure that that's going to get cleaned up after these lots are sold?
The Department of Environmental Protection, that's the enforcement agency.
And, but what kicks that in? I mean, at what point? And to Pat's point too, about if they don't have enough money to do it,
Right.
then what? I don't know. I mean, this came before us before, and that was my stumbling block was.
I recall.
You know, putting the cart before the horse here.
Well, I think, so I think the way that I answered that last time, and is the way I'm going to answer it this time, is that this is part of the solution, that unless this property is sold, nothing's happening. Right now, the land is owned by, I think, 9 family members, and they aren't getting along with each other. They don't see eye to eye on what to do, and so nothing's getting done. So the idea here is to do something and then try to solve the problem, which I think is better than not doing anything at all. But I respect this, and I want to try to answer the questions to the best of my knowledge, and I'm happy to come back with further information on the continued hearing. But in reality, what's before you is the subdivision. So I know that there's concern about the landfill, but it's the subject of a separate proceeding brought by the DEP that's finalized and is now embodied in this consent order that I refer to that requires the remediation to be done.
John?
It appears that if this gets approved, it can't be approved with that kind of a condition on it.
No, because it's not in our purview.
'Cause it's not in our purview. My question is, I'm just a little bit, I don't say confused, but are we going to be approving a 2-lot or a 4-lot subdivision if we approve it? I know the other 2 lots are buildable, I know that.
Right.
But are they requesting a 2-lot,
2.
just a 2-lot subdivision?
What's before you, the plan shows 4 because we want to disclose and be
But no-
upfront. But what's being asked of the board is to have definitive approval of the 2 lots that don't have frontage.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, I know, yes. Sure you include your title.
Sure, I'm Doug Brown. I serve on the select board, but I'm just here as a resident of Falmouth. So I'm surprised that if the reason for doing the subdivision is to cure the issue in the back, I don't see how they can be excluded, practically speaking. And I would hope that the planning board would request sufficient bonding to ensure that the work in the back can be done with the proceeds of the work in the front. And, I mean, if it's not tied, I don't see how that's possible, so.
Well, I think they're asking for a continuance, and they know they're going to get one, and there might be time to explore that, but I don't know that we can have a finding that, or a requirement for something that's not in the jurisdiction of the board. We don't have the authority for that, so.
Maybe a town
we would
council
have to
opinion would be in
explore-
order, because it seems like with the road leading to it, it seems like it's involved.
It is involved, and the
Right.
family knows that it's involved, but curiously, it's falling between more than 2 jurisdictions, but the 2 that we're talking about right now is the planning board, us,
Right.
and the DEP. And they have the enforcement, they're supposed to be monitoring it. If they've let it run for years and years, which they have,
It
I would
seems
have a
to,
question about their efficiency.
seem to indicate it could just go on forever and never be cured. So I would say that it would be within your purview, and I'm no attorney, so I don't really know, but
Well, and I note
it
that
seems like
the-
that to
That
me.
the owners here, the price of land has never been higher.
Right.
They're certainly going for the moment when they'll get the most out of it, but we have to stay within our own boundaries. And if the solution that they're looking for involves us approving this, if it's approvable under our bylaws, that's one step toward curing it. But we cannot ask for anything that's not in our jurisdiction.
Certainly. I appreciate the idea of, making an effort to deal with it after all these years, but it seems like the bond would be the way to go to make
would
sure
be
that
if
it
we
gets
could.
done.
And we have time to look into it, but I'm not really sanguine about the result of that. One thing that is sort of comforting is that the easement that they've asked for is the minimum size for an easement. And in order to ever put a road back there, to actually do something with that backland, they would have to have a 44-foot wide easement, and they're not asking for that. They've asked, I think I'm right about this, they've asked for the minimum amount just to do an easement, that's it. So there's no thought in their minds now to ever try to develop that backland into anything except something that the DEP will get off their backs. That's what it sounds like. But it's outside what we do, so we'll just have to deal with the part that we do. I would like to thank you for paying attention to what we said to you. The plan that you brought last time with the weird hook in it and you're trying to fit in extra things, I'm glad you changed it. This is definitely a better plan. And our next meeting is the 28th. You're missing quite a few things. Does 2 weeks give you time to? No. So a continuation, maybe the thing to do is for you to work it out with the planning staff when you will be coming back.
They're aware of when our meetings are, and they're ready to request a
Oh, you have a date certain
continuance.
now?
You'll need a date certain.
Oh, what's the
Yep.
date?
Yeah, I don't have a date certain, Melinda, but the consultant that Mr. Borselli talked about with regard to the stormwater calculations needs about 6 weeks, and then Mr. Borselli will need another 2 to take the information and put it on his plan. So we're going to need at least 2 months.
Right. So early May, maybe.
Let me look.
I think we won't put a date on it right now.
We have to.
I think the open meeting law, if we're not ready, we can ask for another continuance, but
Yes, you can.
to let the public know, you have to put a date on the record. when it-
So 8 weeks is April 11th, and 10 weeks is April 25th. If you want to do,
Okay.
so if you want to do the 11th, that's fine, and then you can just request another continuance if you're not ready.
If it's okay, why don't we do that?
April 11th? Okay, and I don't think we need an approval on that. We just need to have said the date. Is that correct?
I'd make a motion.
Yep.
Oh,
And I would vote it.
but first, John, you had something you wanted to
I just
say?
want a clarification. The plan that we see here, and we see up on the board here, shows lots 1, 2, C, D, and then lot 0, 0, 0. Are all of these parcels, proposed parcels and existing parcels, under one ownership right now? Or is lot 1 owned by someone else?
They're all, I'm not sure I can answer that question directly. The parents of the family members died, and as a result, the property has been, by operation of law, inherited by the next generation. So it's all under the ownership by those heirs, and there's about 9 of them. All of that land is under their ownership.
Is that the OBR Realty Trust?
That's lot 1
That's not one.
that's
okay.
been sold. That's been sold. So,
So the answer to my question would be no, no.
correct. So now that I see what you're asking, let me try to rephrase that. There are 2 separate lines of ownership here. There's the family members that I talked about, let's just say the family interests. And then there was a little bit of extra land here on, that's lot 1, and that was combined to create that particular property.
Okay,
And that's why the applicant is Todd Rainey, trustee, and then the commissioner. The commissioner represents the interests of all those family members.
Sure.
And Todd Rainey happens to be one of them, but he also owns some separate land as well.
okay. All right, thank you.
So we're off till the 11th then, Madam Chair?
I just wonder if we could turn the heat up a little bit in here.
Please, no.
Or pass out some water or something.
Yeah.
Okay, I move that we continue this hearing until April 11th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. And
Thank you
you've
for your
got-
time tonight, and we'll be back with more information on the
Yeah,
11th.
and you've got the list of things that you're missing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, some weeks from now. Next on the agenda, the applicant is Michael Galasso. The site plan review application for a 71-unit workforce housing building with a 973-foot square restaurant at 545 Main Street, former nursing home here on Main Street. Who is, Michael, you're speaking for your project?
Yes, good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Michael Galasso, 107 Lakeview Avenue, for 547 Main Street. This is our second hearing here this evening. Last time when I was here, I spoke mostly about what was happening on the inside of the building, gave you an overview of the project. This evening, we'd like to get into more of the details of the project with what's happening with the site plan, landscaping, parking, and drainage. So since we last met, you hopefully have in your package some letters of support. One came in later today from Jill Neubauer, also from the Falmouth Climate Action Network, and I just want to make sure you have those as part of your package. Also, since the last meeting, we received a couple of emails from the town planner on February 3rd with 17 items that we are addressing, that we are going through. Responded to that on the 6th of February, and then we had a correspondence back from Jed on the 7th. So there are some issues that we're still working on with our site plan, but we'd like to get your comments this evening to see if there's any other issues that you may have, so we can make sure that we can get those satisfied by the time we come back to you for hopefully our next hearing.
Okay, could I comment on that right away?
Sure.
You know that the board, like when you were here before, I believe every member of the board expressed admiration for this project. It is a very admirable project. We're
Thank
all
you.
hoping that it goes ahead with a lot of speed, that we actually get people living there. It's wonderful. However, it puts the board in a bad place. You are not helping us to approve it. In order to approve it, we need a complete application. It's missing, and you've seen the list. It's kind of a long list, and some of them are serious. The remarks from the fire department, for example. But they're all things that need to be attended to, and none of them is a secret. You know, you have the list, we have the list, and what I'd like to ask you to do is to continue this and come back when it's complete so that we can move it ahead, but we need you to help us do that.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and our professional staff is here this evening. They have been working on responding to the comments. Today, we asked for a meeting with the fire department. That seems to be one of the issues, and I think we're working our way through that list. And I think it's, at least it'd be beneficial to us to continue this evening. It's not a very long presentation, but you've never had an opportunity to really get into the landscaping plan that we proposed or the site plan. So I'm not sure whether or not it's beneficial for us just to say, okay, we'll come back when we've answered all 17. We may not be able to answer them all. We may not be able to answer all of them because we're dealing with an existing building on an existing piece of property that's been in operation for over 50 years. And some of the ordinances that you have, some of the bylaws that you have, you know, are more applicable to new construction. So we're losing, and I know parking is very important to you, but to meet all these requirements, we currently have 71 parking spots on site. We're going to be down to 55.
Right.
Okay, and that's because of changing and complying with some of the issues. So we are going through those, and we are working through those. But we've got to find, you know, a compromise, too.
But I think working through them is going to, they'll show up really as a list of waivers that you're requesting probably.
Yes.
The ones that you feel absolutely you cannot deal with another way would be dealt with through a waiver probably. That's paperwork, actually. So I don't think it would be that difficult to assemble the materials that you need to have a complete application. The board doesn't want to be in the position of saying, because this is great and it's affordable housing and it really helps the town, we'll just let all that go. We just can't do that. Those are the bylaws. We need to say that we're holding everyone to them equally, and they need to be there. If we're asking for a drainage plan, we need one. If we're asking for meeting the requirements of the fire department, you need to do that. I don't think any of them is difficult. I think that you could do it in a speedy way.
Well, they're only difficult because they all involve time and they involve money. And it's my money and my partner's money. So every time you ask for a change, you know, that costs us money, that costs us time. We have an existing contract to buy the property, which has a certain time period that we have to close by. So I know everyone thinks this is a great project. We've heard that from the very beginning. There's many people here tonight, you know, that feel that way, and you've heard testimony from other people too. The unfortunate part is you don't have bylaws that fit what we're trying to do here. So I'm not sure there is an answer. And if there isn't, then I'd rather find out now instead of continuing to spend time and money on our consultants to try to find an answer to something there isn't an answer to. Because we can only put so many parking spaces on there. And if parking is the main issue, if we're more concerned about parking than we are providing housing, then we should know that.
Well, that's characterizing our response in that way, because I don't believe that that's true. And you had a plan of working with St. Patrick's next door to continue the arrangement they had with the nursing home for overflow parking there. So there's a way to do it. There's other avenues for off-site parking. That's how that's usually handled.
Yeah, and I have talked to St. Patrick's. I'm a former altar boy at St. Patrick's, but we have not been able to reach an agreement with them, more because they're not that available. We have one priest now who oversees numerous churches in our community, and in order to get him to agree to what we propose, hasn't been able to be done in a timely manner, unfortunately. But yes, there's over 100 and some odd spaces, over 120 spaces next door that are empty all the time. So, yeah, that could be a solution. But I don't want to commit to an agreement with the church that's going to cost us money if I don't think it's needed.
Well, you're thinking on what's needed, you know, you're thinking as an individual. These are bylaws that we're administering, so it's, you know, two thought processes at work here, and we have the authority.
Yeah, but your bylaws do give you that flexibility for off-site parking, for reduction in parking for other things that we're providing, that we've said that we're providing. We have a bus there in front. So you do have, under your guidelines, the ability to reduce the parking that's required on site.
Let's see if we could agree on a time by which you think you would be ready with a complete application so that we could go ahead with this. Is
I'm not
another 2
quite
weeks
sure.
going to do it?
I'm not quite sure what your definition is of a complete application.
Well, you've been working with Jed on it. You must have a reasonably good idea.
Well, there are items that Jed brought up that we're working on, yes. Yeah, that's what your definition of a complete application.
Yes.
Okay, and so you'd like us to come back and tell you which ones we are able to comply with and which ones we're not?
No, I'd like you to come back with the ways that you're showing that you're working, that you're going to comply with it.
Well, that's what we have this evening, but if you don't want to take the time to see it, I can understand. Because we have heard from the fire department. We know what they're asking. We have a drawing that shows you what it takes for us to comply with that and what we lose because of that. And every time we do something, we continue to lose parking. So, again, is it going to be parking or is it going to be housing?
This isn't parking versus housing. That isn't the right way to characterize this. Jed?
Good point.
I guess what I would suggest is that perhaps I can meet with the applicant and his design team in between tonight's meeting and your next meeting, and we can try to hammer out exactly what's missing, how they might be able to achieve compliance. But I do think it's important for the board to consider the discussion of drainage, because there's been some back and forth on drainage and whether or not it really requires a drainage analysis. I think it's wise that the board would consider requiring an analysis, but I think there might be a compromise there. So with your permission, I can work with the applicant to figure out what that compromise might look like.
And what the list of waivers requested would be. Does that sit with the board?
I think this is what he does with every applicant.
Yep.
This isn't something new. And Mr. Glasso is a professional real estate developer. I know he understands this, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always up for cooperation and meeting. We've said that from the very beginning. That's how we get these projects, you know, approved and move forward. And we don't always get the conditions that we all like, but we try to continue to move forward with them, so. But this is just a different situation. We're not taking a vacant piece of property and developing it where there's a lot more, you know, flexibility that we have. So I just want the board to keep that in mind as we move forward. We'll try to do the best that we can as far as with the restraints that we have with the existing structure and existing parking and existing drainage system, and trying to get the big fire truck all the way around the building.
And the people in the basement protected. It's my understanding you're going forward with this as an accommodation?
You
under
mean
that
as far as
bylaw?
under what zoning?
Right, the
Yeah.
use would be a commercial accommodation, special permit from the zoning board of appeals.
And as far as people in the basement, we've already met with the building department about exiting from those spots.
Okay, good. So we'll see you back here in 2 weeks?
Sure.
Has a list of waivers been generated?
You're going to be working on it.
That's what you're gonna work on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is 2 weeks enough time? We need all the information in 1 week prior to the meeting.
Just gonna say.
Okay, we're available to meet this week and next week.
But we need all the revised plans, the complete everything, 1 week, like meaning
Yeah, I think we-
Tuesday before the meeting. So
Yeah, I think we're aware of that, and I think that Tom and Michael are aware of that.
if it's not in a week before the meeting, then it's going to be continued again. Do you understand that? Because this is what we do for everyone. I don't want you to think that we're being hard on you. This is what we do.
No, I never said you were being hard on me. We're
Okay.
trying to get you the information as soon as we produce it.
I understand, but everyone has to have the opportunity to review it, including our engineering team and the fire department. So I just want it to be realistic. I don't want to waste anyone's time. So the next meeting, if you're not going to be ready in 2 weeks, we should make it the meeting
Well,
after
if
that.
if you're gonna be asking us to do a full drainage study to see if the site can hold a 25-year storm, I don't think Mike can have that in 2 weeks. Yeah. So we don't know if you're gonna be asking that. We've heard different comments from the town engineering department, but if that's gonna be a requirement, that's cost two ways. One, we gotta design it. Two, if it's gonna be required to build,
So, not to put pressure on the board, but I do think that the drainage component would be something that we would like some input from you on. I've consulted with engineering, our engineering division. They think it's a good idea to ensure that drainage can be accommodated on the site as you would any redevelopment project that you come across through site plan review. Understanding that there's an existing drainage system on the site now, there's a little bit of complexity there, but we believe that perhaps certain portions of the site could be analyzed and then perhaps mitigated to collect that stormwater. That's sort of the compromise, if you will, rather than doing the entire site. That being said, it's not a large portion of the site that wouldn't be included in that analysis, but hopefully I've explained that well enough, but we really need your input on, would you want to see those drainage calculations supplied to the engineering division?
Pat?
Is this something, Jed, that we could move forward on with this will be done? I'm looking at the time frame.
Yeah.
Time is money.
Would you do that for every applicant? You have to look at this as,
I understand that, and over the years I've been on the board, we have done certain things like that. Can I point out exactly what? No. But I think we have done certain things knowing that they will be done. But the timeline is just not sufficient to accomplish it, to get to where they need to be.
Well, and it's also true that not every applicant has this particular project or site or building, and the statement was made at the last meeting that, watching it over a long period of time, there's never been a drainage problem there. And considering we all know we're getting less rain than we ever did, that's indicative.
Except the deluges that come down occasionally.
Yeah, it's a tricky subject. I mean, obviously, you want every applicant to demonstrate that they can keep stormwater on site. Those are within your regulations, those are within the bylaw. And understanding the applicant and, what they're doing here. So, I just think it's important that we get some guidance from the board on that one.
I mean, what would a study entail? To check to see if what's there is adequate and to change that, to make it better, or, because we heard that it hasn't been a problem. And they're not adding structure, so they're not adding more roof area or anything like that. So I just want to know how entailed something like that would be, if it's a simple thing to just analyze what's already existing to see if it's adequate enough, or I'm not sure how that goes.
I think you might want to ask the applicant that, or their engineer, because I can't answer that
By
question.
no means a stormwater
Yeah.
expert.
Yeah,
I watch it come down and go
yeah,
away.
yeah,
Let Michael answer that for you.
okay.
Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering. So, asking an engineer to tell you if an existing 40 or more year-old drainage system that relies on leaching only, like we all have, most of us probably have leaching systems for your septic systems in the backyard, and as they get older, you wonder how long it's gonna last. I can't answer that. So, because I don't know the efficiency of those leaching structures. All we could do is supplement them in some way to provide additional drainage capacity, but I could never report to you, and I would challenge any engineer to be able to report to you what the capacity of that existing 40-plus-year-old drainage system is. Can't be done.
Okay.
And as soon as I try to do it, I'm gonna be challenged by your town engineer. So, it's impossible. So what does that mean? We submitted anecdotal testimony that we've never seen issues with the drainage on that site, ever. And that doesn't mean the design storm has not come along that would have tipped the scale and caused Armageddon on Main Street, but I don't think that's gonna happen. I think the town's own drainage system on Main Street has its own problems, not to mention, I've never seen, the topography on this site is also such that water doesn't flow uphill.
Yeah.
There's no way for it to flow out on, and it can't flow onto the church parking lot, church property, because there's a retaining wall along the whole side. And there's drainage on the motel side that appears to work. So one of the things we were talking about with this compromise is maybe supplementing that drainage on that side to sort of give you a little bit additional comfort level that and allow you to maybe make some findings in a decision if we do something. But that in and itself still takes time. We have to do soil evaluation, perk test to measure the soil's ability to drain, because that's how these systems work. They drain into the ground. There's no place to pipe to. There's no outlet. There's no depression somewhere where we can pond it like you've seen on other projects. So we have to rely on ground soil recharge. So we have to do that work, and that does take time.
I'm just looking for an easier way to,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, what danger are we actually trying to ward off here? It looks as if the only place where water could flow and cause a problem is on this property, not the two adjoining properties. It's in that depressed area of the driveway on the church side.
For the most part, yes.
But yeah, I don't know what we're trying to prevent as far as a problem to the abutters is concerned, or a problem to the town.
Well, Madam Chair, if I may, there's also the rear of the property. I mean, that, again, not an expert, but that part of the parking lot is very level. And I don't know where that water flows, but there's an abutting set of properties to the rear of the site as well. So, and that's the, indication, or the text in your bylaw. It's that stormwater is supposed to be contained on the site. It's not supposed to run off abutting properties. So that's the risk that you run.
And if I could, Madam Chairman, I concur with Jed on that. If there's any place on the site that would have any potential issue, it would be that back area, because that area doesn't flow onto the neighboring land, but it's relatively close and same level. So if there was gonna be some sort of failure of the drainage and when there's ponding, it might seep onto their land. So if we were gonna pick a place to do some supplemental drainage, it would be in those areas.
Is there room to do supplemental drainage there?
Yeah, we have to dig up the pavement, put pipes and new additional structures in the ground. But I mean, the room's there, it's just, there's an expense to it.
So we can condition it on additional drainage going in?
If needed.
Yeah. I think you're getting the sense that the board would like it to be worked out
Great.
soon.
We're in favor of that. So, thank you for your time tonight.
So shall we continue for 2 weeks or 4?
I would say it's up to the applicant, whichever they.
Excuse me, wait, member of the public, Rob?
So I was unable to attend. It's Robert Dugan, and we have property at 596 Main Street, so we're listed on the abutters list. I was out of town when they had the original presentation. My question just is on the comments tonight regarding the application not being complete. Is there a list in the file anywhere of what the deficiencies are to the application, so that if I go up and look at the application, I just know what the general question issues are?
There will be, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, Madam, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alberto Toselli. I am in the restaurant business here in Falmouth. And of course, I'm in favor of this project because, as you well know, one of the big issues for us is to find staff. It's very difficult to find staff working. I speak for the restaurants, but I could speak for hotels, motels, and bed and breakfast. It's hard to find staff, but it's impossible to find a place where he or she could go here on the Cape. So that's an answer question we can't answer. As for and one reason why we are open our restaurant, but a lot of restaurants like us, we are open only 5 days a week. It's not a choice. We have to do it because we don't have enough people. And as for the J1, I want to tell you my personal experience. J1 are foreign students. For my experience, what we had here were students from Croatia last year for the University of Zagreb. 4 girls couldn't find a place in Falmouth. They had to go to Mashpee, find a room in Mashpee, pay a fortune, go back and forth, commute, bus, Uber. Sometimes some of our staff would give them a ride. And this was last year. They have to be qualified. There are 2 conditions. They are the best students in the college, so the last year and the year before, only the 2 last years in college. They have to be very smart, and which they are. And the other is that they have to, before coming here, they have to have a place to stay. Otherwise, they can't come. That's one of the conditions. And this year, so far, no one yet called us because last year, these 4 girls, they had a hard time, and then when they go back home, they speak about their experience, which was great, for these 4 months they spent here, but they spent a lot of the money they make on the lodging. And this is the reason why I can't wait for this project to come through. And I'm afraid, as a restaurant, we are waiting for the perfect storm here. I mean, because beside the bridge and the issues with the traffic and this and that, but this is a problem we can't solve. And as for the parking lot, it's not my business, but all I can say, the J1 students, of course, they don't have a car, so and some of the Woodsole scientists, all they need is a shuttle from here to Woodsole because they spend a few months here. Some of them are foreign scientists. They come only for a few months, and then all they need is a shuttle or a bus. What I heard is there's going to be a bus stop right outside the place, so it's going to be easy for them to go back and forth. So I not want to speculate here, but I think that some of those parking lots probably could be empty, But, this is my opinion. I don't
Well,
want
we
to.
appreciate your support for the project. We've heard from a number of people who are depending on it for their help. It is a problem when we're trying to find a solution, so thank you for your support for the project.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, Madam Chair and other members of the Planning Board. My name is Lynn Shad. I am a realtor in town. I'm also a member of the Beach Committee, and I'm on the steering committee for, not the steering committee for the Falmouth Climate Action Network. You may recall that you received a letter of support from us for this project. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to highlight some of those important points. It sounds like the board is very much for the project, but we just have some details to work out, but I'd like to share this with you. As we all know, we have a big issue with affordable housing. And so we need to have more housing options, obviously, for seasonal and year-round workers that support our town's ever-expanding tourism. As this gentleman pointed out, we can be losing help through the not having people, seasonal workers and year-round workers, a place to live. This project also employs sustainable and energy-efficient practices, solar rooftops, energy-efficient appliances, heat pumps for heating and cooling. They're even considering EV charging stations and e-bike sharing. So that came to my mind when you were talking about the issue with having enough parking spaces. I don't know exactly what goes behind that, but does every unit have to have a parking space? Because this project, because it has an in-town location and many of the workers may be working fairly locally, they may not need to have a car. They could use public transportation, they could walk to their place of business, they could use bikes, they could use e-bikes. So that may be a way of kind of like working through some of those issues. We're also working with existing infrastructure. So the town, the existing facility is already connected to town sewer and will likely use less water than the former function of the property. And the project also is consistent with the town's mixed residential commercial overlay district plans to provide, because it's providing residences as well as a place, as well as the restaurant. It also addresses some of the goals of the town's local comprehensive plan for adaptive uses of existing structures. Mr. Galasso has worked on many projects with the town successfully. He's well-known and respected, and he has the support of the Affordable Housing Committee. So this project is forward-thinking. From the sounds of things, I don't think I'm telling anybody here anything that they don't already know, but it could be a really good model for future projects going forward. So we would like to strongly endorse this project to go forward and be of any help we can to work out some of the solutions for it. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciated getting your letters of support, and we're 100% with you on all of that reasoning. Mr. Galasso has done a great deal of good planning. Yep.
Hi, Doug Brown again, just speaking as a Falmouth resident. I want to speak in support of this project because, I mean, we all know that we really need more housing, and this is a great addition that we could have on Main Street. I would hope you would consider reducing some of the parking requirements because the public safety comes first. And I hope you'd consider waiving the requirement for the drainage study. You can just condition it and say that all water should be retained on site. I mean, that's the rule anyway. And if it becomes a problem, maybe you'd require a bond until we determine that it's adequate. But it's just gonna hold up time and do an exercise in futility because, as Mr. Mike has said, that, you know, it's not practical anyway. So I hope you could waive that and just move it forward as fast as possible. Just my hope.
We're all hopeful, very, very hopeful. Let's see, we already had the motion?
I think we had a
Any more
motion.
comments?
Hmm?
Any more comments?
I don't think we're inviting more comments. I think that we're going to continue this till
Sounds like 2 weeks,
the
so
28th.
February 28th, if that's all right with the
So if I
applicant.
could have a motion?
So we don't really have to do that because it's a
Not for
site plan review.
Oh, okay, good. So we'll just continue it till the 28th and hope that it's a complete application at that time and that you all have been successful in working together. We've heard some suggestions that are good. There has to be a way to solve this. Thank you. Okay, moving on. The applicant is Samuel Pakowski. I hope I haven't mispronounced that. Site plan review application to construct an attached accessory apartment at 284 Hatchville Road. Who is speaking for that? Is that Mr. Pakowski?
Notice.
Oh. The abutters. Did we notify the abutters? I even have a note right in front of me.
Excuse me. Madam Chair, the notice of this public meeting was published on January 27, 2023, and 31 abutters were notified by regular mail. Thank you.
31. Wow.
31.
Madam Chair and Board, good evening and happy Valentine's Day. My name is Sam Paikowski, and together with my wife Lynn, we are the owner of
Excuse me, I didn't get,
284.
your name is what?
Sam Paikowski.
Paikowski. Thank you.
And Lynn, my wife, and myself are the owners of 284 Hatchville Road. And part of the new construction that we build, we submitted an application for an accessory apartment. I think that all the details are there. First of all, thank you, Melinda, for helping us in completing the application and having all the details. I'm not so sure what more do I need to present. I can present what the site is. The lot is a large lot. It's 11 acres, which is bounded by Hatchville Road, and the house is on one side on Shady Lane. The other side is Deep Pond, Crooked Pond Farm. Good neighbors for a long time. And this is the house that we are building. As part of the house, we are requesting a permit for an accessory apartment, which is part of the house. Essentially, the house is in a U shape. The accessory apartment is on the second floor of the north side of the house. Other than that, I don't know the details. It stands by all the requirements that the board has. One by one was presented and approved, and I don't know if there are any questions or anything that you need from me.
Melinda, do you want to speak on this?
Yep, so the proposed accessory dwelling unit is only 10% of the existing home. It meets all the requirements. It's inside of the house, so there's no other, they're dealing with the drainage issues or the drainage on the site. There's no issues because they're building the house right now. The house it's under construction, so they're doing this at the same time. There's no issues. It meets all our regulations.
It does appear to meet them all very well. It's really an amazing house.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
We're waiting for it for many
I had a
years.
good time looking through the plans. Thank you.
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
I see an elevator there.
Correct.
And I have often wondered, because all of these accessory apartments seem to be up, and you hope maybe there will be elderly people using them, and I don't know about other elderly people.
But the elevator doesn't go to the accessory apartment.
But it goes to where you
Accessory
can get to the.
Exactly.
Over here.
Yes, but look at it, it goes to where you can get to the accessory apartment.
Correct.
Because this is over part of the three-car garage. And I thought, whoa, okay. I thought that was over the three-car garage, wasn't it? I misread everything then.
No, it's actually accessible if the plan is not. There is a deck on the second floor that brings from the location of the elevator if
Okay,
needed
so
to
it's
the
on top
place.
of this. And I thought,
I hope
that
we-
is smart when I saw elevator.
Hopefully, we won't need to use it.
It looks as if the living room is one big pavilion. It's going to be really lovely. So, yes, it does appear to meet all of our requirements, so we'll, single-family building.
So we're still getting used to our new format.
Right.
Now, we had prepared a positive motion for you, but I'm looking through my packet, and I forgot to print it. So,
I think I forgot to print it.
Okay.
so shame on us.
So if we could have a positive motion for our next meeting,
Okay.
that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Rolling over.
Very much. Yes.
Or public comment, of course.
Hello, my name is Mark Kurz. I'm an abutter on 43 Shady Lane. Nice to meet you. It's a shame to only meet in a public forum. But I have a question, which is I should ask the board, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My question is this a single-family dwelling? It's a large house with a big impact on, a potentially big impact on the pond. And I'm just wondering what the long-term plan is for the house and for the surrounding land. So maybe that's beyond the purview of the board, but I thought I'd ask it since I'm here. Thank you.
I think the submittal of the permit is clear. It's a single-family house. The fact that the house is a bit big, that's certain reasons. If we actually look on the lot and look on the entire Shady Lane that you're part of it, I would say that the impact of this single-family house will be significantly smaller than the entire Shady Lane. So that answers your question. And thank you very much. I'm sorry we couldn't meet you earlier. In the past, it didn't work very well. But that's not because of you. It's, I think, internal problems of Shady Lane.
How many bedrooms? Is it?
4. Well, this will be
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
Any other member of the public want to speak? No. Okay, thank you. And we'll have a motion to act on at our next meeting.
Yes, you will.
So moved.
You're welcome.
At our next, we do not have any other business before us. We do have some discussion items. So our first has been withdrawn, the request for an administrative approval for Mr. Street. The second one, the request for a determination of access. Jed, do you want to talk about that?
Certainly. So in your packets, and information's been provided to the members of the board, a determination of access is being requested for Lot 4 on Timothy Bourne Cartway. As you are familiar, determination of access comes into play when a property owner is looking to apply for a building permit, and when the road in question that the parcel of land is located on is not a public way and is not a way created under subdivision control, which Timothy Bourne Cartway satisfies both of those requirements. It is not either of those two. It is a way that, in the opinion of the planning board, has to be or is improved to a certain condition, having adequate width, grade, and construction. So those are the things that you, as the planning board, have to consider for tonight. Included in the packet is a summary letter, a GIS map, which is up on the screen. Also, the deed and the plot plan showing the creation of the lot back in 1933. In addition to that are some of the previous determinations provided by the planning board for Timothy Bourne Cartway. There's a collection, I believe, of 4. And lastly are photographs that the applicant took of the roadway itself. Lastly, provided for the board are information from the fire department as well as our engineering division. Planning staff met with those folks out on the site last week, I believe, and they provided some information for you to consider for your determination. That is the extent of my summary, and I will provide recommendations later on if you'd like.
Okay, board, do you have any questions about it? John?
I don't have a question, but I would like to just add that the lot next door to this received a building permit, and the house was built there 2 years ago.
Yeah, you can
Next
see it
door
in the
neighbor.
aerial, yeah, so it's already, and it's beyond it. And the letter that we got says that the town already,
This lot is beyond the house that got built.
yes. Looking there at
The next lot over.
if we look right up there, what you're saying is the lot on the downside there was just built, and the house beyond, there's a house beyond it, and the town is already providing trash, pickup, and snow removal.
And they grade the road once or twice a year, depending on the needs.
Ah, so it's a dirt road?
That part of it is a dirt road.
It's a dirt road, but it counts as a way.
There used to be a way that went all the way over to Carriage Shop Road. But when the golf course got built, it got eliminated.
Oh, I wondered how such a long road ever got approved. But it was, at one point, it went somewhere. Any other questions from the board? Comments?
I don't have a
Pat?
problem with this at all, but the prior approvals were a 10-foot canopy, I think, and it's got to be 13 and a half.
Yeah.
I have no problems with it. It's just going to have to be increased in height.
Yeah, so current fire code indicates 20 feet wide vegetative clearance and 13 and a half feet vertical clearance. You may see in the information from the fire department that they were asking for 13 and a half feet of vertical clearance. They indicated to us in the field that 18 feet would be adequate for vegetative width.
So we would condition it on that.
It's really up to the board to decide what sort of conditions you want for your width, grade, and construction. So, for example, construction, do you want to leave it as gravel? Would you rather see it paved? Width, what distance would you like? Vertical and horizontal, those types of things. But as I mentioned, the previous determinations have, generally speaking, it started off back in time, approximately 14 feet of vertical, or of horizontal.
Yeah.
Made its way to 16, now it's 18. We measured out in the field anywhere between, 18 to 19 feet. There are some areas where it may need a trim of 2 or trees. But for the most part, we saw 18 feet of vegetative clearance width-wise.
Any member of the board want to add any other conditions? No?
I just want to note, I believe someone had their hand up, so I don't know if you want to entertain comments or questions, but just wanted to make it.
Yeah,
You're
she's,
the applicant.
Yeah.
Oh,
On behalf of the owner of the property, and I just wanted to say that I'm here, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
questions?
None.
No,
I don't think so. I think we're all set. Thank you.
Just double checking.
having the pictures is great.
Yeah, thank you. It was very helpful to have the pictures. So if we could have a positive motion for our next meeting
Well, you can
with the
just,
conditions.
if you'd like, you can just indicate to us today what you would like to see in a letter, and we can file
And we
that
can
letter
go
with the
ahead and
building
do it.
commissioner. So would you like to do 18 feet of width?
18, 13 and a half,
Okay,
leave it as a dirt road.
okay. Would you like the road regraded or any potholes filled? There was an indication that that might be helpful from the site visit. There's a significant crowning of the road at this point, so it may be helpful to just grade off that top and just redistribute.
Sure.
As I said, the DPW's been doing that.
Ah,
They've been grading that road.
yeah,
Once or twice a year, they do it.
anyway,
Yes, for years.
So is that going to be necessary then to have a pothole filled if DPW goes out there? I don't know.
I can check with DPW to see when their next pass of that
Okay.
property is. If it's within a certain window of time, it wouldn't be included in the determination, but perhaps if it's past a year, we would add it into the determination.
I mean, no one's asking for a building permit, they're just asking if it's a buildable lot.
How do you want to play the grading? Would you like,
I wouldn't worry about it now because once they start building, if they have equipment out there, they can fill a pothole pretty easily.
okay.
So
So
I
go
don't
with
think
the,
I'd be concerned about it.
I'm not concerned about it.
then I'm not. I didn't go out there and look at it, so I really don't know.
do you
Live
want to
2
see?
doors away from it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And I've been out
Not
there.
in the butter, but I'm 2 doors away.
And, yeah, we've been out there numerous times.
Yes.
Yeah, so not to worry.
Okay, so no regrading, no pothole filling, none of that. Okay. Very good.
All right, we'll write the letter
Were
up.
we to include it, it might appear to be a comment on the DPW that we're nagging them.
So just to be clear, in the 2015 letter, there was also language about that this decision does not allow basically the applicant to go and do the work. It also indicates that it's not allowable for an A&R. Doesn't do that, but it also indicates that there's potential for additional development, and any other lot that comes for a building permit would have to do their own determination. So all of that verbiage would be okay?
Yep.
All right, very good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, our next discussion item is short-term rental update. Ann?
My
Yes.
colleagues just have a quick question. So you said that you're gonna do the letter, I'm just not familiar with the whole process. How long until we get, I didn't know
We'll probably-
what timeframe you produce it in which, and that's all I was wondering.
Sure, we'll write up the letter tomorrow and we'll send it
Oh,
down
wow,
to Gary.
That's
Yeah.
quick. I didn't know it was like 30 days.
No, it's by
That's
the end
all.
of the week, probably.
Yeah, let's say the end of the week, just to be safe.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's all, thank you.
Okay.
Now, Doug is here and also taking an interest in the short-term rental issue. I asked for it to be on the agenda because I've heard it from just a number of people I know in town, that one of the reasons we have a shortage of housing is too many of the houses that used to be available for winter rental no longer are, because people are trying to turn themselves into hotel keepers and are renting them out as B&Bs, Airbnbs and so forth. And just doing a very cursory bit of research on Google, a number of towns, and some on the Cape, have already made an effort to bring it under local control in some way. And I am hoping that we would be able to do that if you want to. And I wonder if any of you have been thinking about it.
Not in any sense of looking at it in a legal sense, but just in conversation. You know, how do you regulate something like this? And do we have the right to regulate it? I mean, it's private property. You know, those are the issues that come up.
They do, and yes, apparently we do have the right to do that. To ask, for them to register, so at least you know where they are. But from what I read, the town would have to put some money into it. You really need somebody to administer it.
Yeah, and enforce it.
Right. Otherwise, nothing happens, as we all know, so that it would be an expense to the town. But those towns that have done it appear to be making more on it than they're losing paying for this part-time or full-time, depending on the town and how much they've put into it. And Doug, I wonder what you had found out about it.
Hi, Doug Brown again, Falmouth resident. So I will tell you right now, I have a little cottage over on the water in East Falmouth that I've owned forever, in the part of the property where I grew up. And we found it difficult to keep long-term tenants in there because it's only 550 square feet. So it's too small to really live year-round, and we had a lot of good people come and go. And when Airbnb came out several years ago, we tried that, and it worked well for the cottage. So I'll be the first to admit that I have one, but I'd be willing to lose it if it meant that the regulations would take it away. I mean, I think that's how important of a problem it is. And being that I have one, I get targeted for mailings and advertisements and even social media things. I don't know how that works, but I see a lot of these. And I get advertisements lately for professional management opportunities and investment opportunities. Be a investor in short-term rentals as a business model and manage multiple units and become, passively wealthy, passive income through this management system. And in my thinking, it's a business use in a residential area. So I think that's my biggest problem with it, returning neighborhoods into profit centers at the expense of our local housing stock. So that's why I'm concerned, and I see this, what seems to be an avalanche of business managed multiple ownership opportunities coming. So I don't know exactly how we would target it, but the first thing that came to mind for me was that it's a business use. It should only be allowed in business zones initially until you have enough time to think about what might be an appropriate way to, manage it with zoning, if there is such a thing. I mean, it's a tricky one, because as you said, it's private property. And I don't know how you delineate between multiple ownership or private ownership. But when you start having LLCs that have 6, 8, 10 units, it becomes a concern to me, especially when it's in residential areas. I last year went to visit my daughter. She lives in Virginia. We decided to meet in a halfway point. It wasn't really halfway, but Maryland. So I looked up at Airbnb to stay in one. It was our first time staying in one. And it was amazing to me that one corporation had hundreds and hundreds of listings. And it said, gee, what is happening here? So that was my first wake-up call to what is probably coming our way. So I think we need to think about it and take some sort of action. So I've asked Senator Moran and her staff to consider legislation. She actually has legislation that deal with affordable housing, so they've rolled that in as a small part of it to get a handle on the number of units, because some are going unaccounted for. I know with Airbnb, they won't list you unless you have a tax ID number for paying your taxes. And the other concern is taxing it alone. I don't think really does the problem, because it's not the owners that pay the tax, it's the people who stay in the rental that pay all the taxes. 13.5% right now, I think. But to the owner, it doesn't matter because you're still getting your money. So that's not really a deterrent.
But the argument for that is that it levels them up with the motels and hotels. Who do have to pay it because they are functioning as hotels.
Right.
And it just means that they're going to have to pay at least a similar tax, maybe not the same.
Certainly.
But because it is a business use in a residential neighborhood, there would be a way to address it. And the ones that I've looked at from other towns, they distinguish between ones where it's owner occupied. They're not involved in this. You can go ahead and do that, so that's your house, and you're there looking after it, and you're not affected by it. You don't pay any extra taxes. You're already paying taxes. But the others, and they pick different limits, do find a way. We wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel at all. We just would have to get consensus in a group on what we want to include in it. The problems with it, there's the problem of, it's changing the neighborhoods, the character of them, is that people are renting them out as party houses. They don't want to destroy their own house. They think they'll come and destroy yours. And it's just, and they're too noisy. They change the character of the neighborhood.
One thing I will say to people that are dealing with that is you report them directly to the agency that does that. Like say if it's an Airbnb, it's hard to find out. But if you could figure it out and report them to that, Airbnb is very strict on policing disruptions in neighborhoods and parties and unwanted activities. So they could lose their listing if they're not managing it properly.
Any other thoughts?
It seems that.
Go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead, no, go ahead, Jim.
What is the purpose of our discussion tonight? To find a way to tax these things or to prevent them?
What I'm hoping is that we're going to move toward putting together a group to develop a bylaw of some sort to bring these under control.
They're already.
These what?
The
What are we talking about?
short-term rentals. So this would be Airbnbs, but it turns out there are a lot of companies doing this. We're familiar with Airbnb, VRBO, but it turns out there are a lot of them. It's not just monitoring one or two websites, it's a lot of websites.
I moved here in 1970, and there's been short-term rentals here. I've been here going on 53 years.
Well, in the resort
There's
towns,
always been short-term rentals. There were a lot of winter rentals and summer rentals when I moved here. That's kind of dissipated because of some of the rental laws, but I'm just trying to figure out what we're trying to, what's the problem here that we're trying to resolve, if there is a problem? That somebody more professionals made a business out of it and people are profiting from it, or?
Well, it's corporations that have been buying up a lot of property and That's all they're doing with it.
Maybe in some areas.
Yeah, and it's having an effect, and I think what Doug is saying too is that we don't want that effect here. It's happening in the cities, it's happening in some
So
of the cities.
do we prevent corporations from owning houses? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with individuals doing that with their own house, but when you have a corporation that is buying multiple units and pretty much dictating what the rental market is in an area, I have a problem with that.
well, it sounds like hotel chains. I mean, they have overnight rentals, short-term rentals, and
They're in
Right.
business zones.
I understand, but
Yeah.
but they're still taking away opportunities from other people to make money renting their houses out.
Yeah,
No, but it's part of our,
And-
well, we've come to understand that's doing business. We want hotels.
And why have all of our hotels disappeared? Not all of
If
them,
we
but
keep
a
having too many
majority of
short-term
them.
rentals, that's a
Yeah.
possibility.
Yeah, so,
I think my question is, do we really want a business use of our local housing stock in residential areas? That's my real question.
did you consider your short-term rental business use? You have 500 square feet you rent, do you consider that a business use?
Well, I file taxes on it, yeah.
Is that a
It's
yes?
it's
You
an
consider
income
it a
property.
business use? It's a business use?
It's an income property, yeah. It is a business use. And that's why I put that out there up front. And I would be willing to lose it if it meant that that's what had to happen to address this concern, because I feel like it hasn't really hit us yet, but I figure it's coming when I see the advertising that I see about targeting people to take this on as a business venture, whether you're just an investor or a manager. I mean, there's coaches out there that are targeting people to
To do what?
to own multiple units.
Could you explain what you would see happening in the town of Falmouth?
I would see
What's your
happening,
vision of the problem?
okay, so an investor targets Falmouth and says, I'm gonna go do short-term rentals here because it's a vacation, it's a destination, it's an area that's,
An investor or a corporation that owns,
doesn't really matter.
doesn't matter?
Whether it's an individual with 16 properties or a corporation with 16 properties, doesn't matter. It's the intent of making a business use out of our residential housing stock. That's the concern I have.
Well, to me, that's American enterprise. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree with
If I
you.
could own 16 houses and rent them out, good for me.
Right? It is good for you, but it
But-
may not be
but
good
it's
for
al-
us.
It's always a risk. It's a risk business.
Yep.
We could have oil spill off here next year, and nobody comes to Cape Cod anymore for 100 years.
Well, that could happen. But my thing is, the affordable housing problem is so huge that I think we need to look at every single aspect of it. I think the short-term rental is just one small aspect of it. I think you guys have done a great job with the Mr. Cod zoning, with the accessory apartments. I think all the right things are falling into place to address the problem. It hasn't really come to fruition yet, but I think we really need to pay attention to every single aspect of it, and I think this is one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Rob? Thank you.
Yeah, Robert Dugan, I just want to make a couple comments, and I'm a Realtor in town, so I've dealt with summer rentals over the years. I don't do them right now. There's a couple different things with the summer rentals. A lot of the original families that were here used to do a lot of winter rentals, but they did it because at that time, they could keep the properties up, they could pay taxes, they could have a little income, and do it at a lower rate monthly, and somebody, have somebody in the house through the winter if there was a freeze-up. Over the years, that's changed. As the population ages, they're looking to make more money on the property. So many of those properties have switched over from doing winter rentals to just doing summer at the higher rate a longer period of time. I think what you're trying to look at is trying to change a mindset, which is going to be very difficult. That maybe someone should look at their property of not renting it on a seasonal basis and instead rent it at a lower rate year-round for seasonal workers or lower income. I don't know if that is going to be a really big pull for some of the families that are doing it for other reasons. It's not that they don't want to rent them at a lower rate, they don't want to rent a lower period of time, they're looking for income to come in. There's also regulations in the law with longer-term rentals versus short-term. There's issues with lead paint that are different if you're doing short-term and long-term. There's upgrades that are different. There's issues with security deposits that they have to deal with now that are different ways they're held by the state. They also have issues if someone's there a longer period of time, they may not get out when the family wants to use them. And then you get issues like the courts are filled up right now with eviction processes. So on a comment on how the town is doing, we actually do have a requirement here to register summer rentals. They just haven't not enforced it in the town.
Right.
They did to a point and then they stopped. I do know the town is looking to get a contractual service to have a company to at least try to get a baseline of what rents in the town, doing web searches, trying to find out addresses of properties, so at least they have a better idea of actually what is being done here, what is year-round, what is summer rentals.
What office is doing that, Rob?
Peter Johnson Staub has mentioned a couple times that they're looking at a company to do these searches, because the other thing on the town end is, without registering these properties, the town is losing a lot of money. You know, the town could use the registrations on these properties, or they could change the registration fees. They could take those monies and put it towards a affordable housing fund. You know, there's things they could do with the monies, but unless you find them, find the properties and know what they are, you can't take advantage. On the situation of a corporation may own it versus a family or an owner, that is going to be very hard to do, because nowadays everyone is doing LLCs, individual families are doing LLCs. You have properties that will be putting in a trust. You may have properties that have been financed as investment properties. So there's issues with the mortgages that they deal with. So it's going to be a very widespread effect, you know, over the area. It really depends on what you want to do with them. But even in some of these, there was an example of an affordable housing complex, a 40B, that was down here, and some of the market rate units are now doing them as investments. They actually bought the market rate units in these 40B properties for investment rentals, for short-term summer rental. But it affects all areas, so you have to figure out what specifically you're trying to do. If you're trying to say that we want to lower the amount of summer rentals so that people are going to be renting them out affordably or year-round, that may not happen, just because of the other legal complications they have when they rent them that way. A lot of people went with these Airbnbs and these VRBOs also because when the state changed the laws on taxability of summer rentals, they required agencies to actually get a separate tax identification number. And if I was doing summer rentals right now, I would not only report the rentals I rent, I'm forced to report any rentals for the weeks I don't rent. The VRBOs and these other companies, they take it all out in front. There's no issues with them. They also pay it, so you don't have to worry about an owner not paying. But that's why there's also been a switch over to these shorter-term rentals. It's easier for them tax-wise.
No, I think you've pointed out exactly how complicated this whole thing is.
It's just going to be very, very complicated. And I also don't know if you've looked at other towns, but are there any? You know, we live on the Cape. It's a second home tourist destination.
There seemed to be a real division in the communities that have tried to do something about this. The resort communities have to approach it very, very differently. They just, because their situation
You
is
just
so
have to.
different.
I mean, it's just
You
a
have
different way
to.
to look at
But
it.
there are a number of resort communities that have done that already, so we can learn from them. And it could be, just as John said, if you got a group together to study it, that there's not a problem to solve. Maybe Falmouth doesn't have to do anything about it, but I agree with Doug. I'd rather see us try to at least know about it and see whether or not we should be acting on it.
You know, there might be something with an increased tax base or something that you can take the additional monies, just like they're doing on the hotel motel tax, and putting it into the Affordable Housing Fund. Legally, I think if you try to stop summer rentals in general, or vacation rentals or VRBOs, I think you're looking at a huge amount of money in just the law, on the law side, and in case law and property rights. It's going to tie you up a lot longer than trying to figure out another way to maybe come about it where, you know, do an education that, look, this is what we're looking at. Are you willing to give up some of your, you know, your rental amounts so that you can, would you be willing to do an affordable rental for a month in the summer? You know, see what the willingness of it to do, because the first thing that's going to happen, even when they think there's going to be a curtailing of summer rentals, is you are going to have attorneys lining up at the door suing on every single basis you can think of. You're also going to have the real estate board will come out against you just because it's a property rights issue. You'll have all these other people, and you're going to be tied up so much in the discussion on can we do it, can't we do it. Maybe you can find some kind of median, have some public forums, see if there's some kind of medium that you can deal with, or some other way to pull the taxes. But it really needs to start with the town has to register. They have to enforce the registration.
Have somebody to actually
It's very
look at
low
it.
right now. I think it's still $25 to register your rental. But that was also important too, when you mentioned that there might have been issue with noise complaints or issues with the town. You can only put in that complaint if it's a registered property. Because what happens is the tenants have already moved out by the time the complaint goes in. You can't go after the tenant at that point. So you have issues with it.
Well,
so.
I think you can put in a noise complaint at any time you want.
You
When
can, but
there's
what happens
noise-
is the noise complaint is on, let's say, this period, and then when they come out to do the noise complaint, that person just moved out on a Saturday, there's no noise to follow up on.
But the owner's around there
Yeah.
somewhere. But is there any interest on the board in actually serving on a subcommittee to look further into this?
No.
No. But, Rob,
How about if we serve ice cream?
I have a
Oh, wait,
comment I'd
well-
like to make.
Yes. What, Doug, would you serve it?
I would definitely serve. I would just say that also that I've asked Mr. Johnson Staub and Town Council to give an opinion of what is possible. My own thinking is that if anything was possible, it's most likely just get the Attorney General or some attorney from DHCD to declare that they find this a business use, and that going forward, future properties would be regulated to business zones until there was such zoning that was in place, or whatever kind of regulations would be applicable. I don't think it's possible to take away anybody's property rights. So when I offer to lose mine over, the regulations, it's probably not practical, because I don't think that you can go back in time and say, I know you've been doing this forever, but you're not going to do it anymore. I don't think that's possible. But I would really more be concerned with the future and just say that going forward, maybe at some particular date, whenever that finding might be made, if the Attorney General would even take it up. It is a tricky, sticky subject, but I just want to make awareness of it, that it's a problem.
We have lots of examples. We've got a bylaw book full of examples of where we have curtailed property rights. This isn't taking them away, it's shaping them and curtailing them. The ADU law, which says the owner has to be there 7 months of the year, it can only be for a full rental, it can't be for short-term rental. We've already done it, we know that we can do it. We know that lots of other communities have already regulated short-term rentals. So I think can we do it? Yeah, I think so. Do we want to do it? We don't know that.
Right.
What form would it take? Nothing that I read used exactly your formulation of the problem, that this is a business use in a residential neighborhood, but you're absolutely right.
That's the way I see it.
Right, you're right about that. But I think it's worth trying to shape, because it is going to grow. Pat?
The comment I wanted to make is that we're talking about Mike Galasso and the necessity for a place for workers to stay during the summer that they can't get otherwise. And he said, well, one restaurant owner could take up all the bunk space in his place, and that's it, no more. So one restaurant gets all of that bunk space. I'm wondering, from what Rob was saying, if some homeowners that he might be aware of who have bedroom space down the basement, that a bunk bed or something in a bathroom, if they could somehow be convinced to rent very cheaply to the people who are looking at something like Mike Galasso is doing. And maybe you know some people, Doug, that you can reach out to.
Unfortunately, those things are probably not legal habitation.
I'm sure they're not legal.
That's the only way we survive here,
unless people
is
are gonna
people
live
living
with
in
the family.
basements,
Yeah.
and it's
Cape
unfortunate.
Cod
Well, you would
baseball.
say they're living with the family. They would be.
Right.
We
It's
do
hard to
have bylaws
legislate
for
human
rooming
behavior.
houses.
Yeah. But
We allow rooming houses, don't we?
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, there's quite a bit that the bylaw allows,
Yeah.
but it's complicated.
Would you want to work on this?
I don't know if I could, because my profession, You know, I deal with a lot of these summer rentals. I think I would be too conflicted with properties I've handled over the years. And I would say again on the mindset that, you know, we had, before we had the ADUs, you know, we did have affordably restricted apartments. And the first thing that happened when we made it a by right is every one of those wrote the zoning board of appeals and removed their restrictions. So, you know, it's a complicated, that's the first thing that happened when that passed.
Yeah.
Even when Sari was here, we got letters in, everyone that had been permitted and had a restriction for an affordable restriction immediately removed it. I don't even know if those even get removed from our rolls or not. We may still be counting them, but they all removed them right away. The first thing
One of the-
Wow.
One of the things that Rob brought up, nothing to do with the short-term rentals, but with long-term rentals and evictions and things like that. And the elephant that's always in the room when it comes to affordable housing is, I have family members who have empty apartments because they will not rent them out in this state because they've gotten burned so bad by tenants in this state because landlords don't have the rights that they do in other states. And I can go through horror story after horror story, not just my family, but friends who have had a year of lost rent, and then tens of thousands of dollars of damage from tenants that wasn't recovered. I would not want to be a landlord in this state because I feel you don't have any rights in this state.
That's why you don't have winter rentals here anymore.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the reason.
right.
Too many people had their places ruined.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And you have
And
no
there's-
recourse as a landlord. My brother's mother-in-law, her nursing home was being paid for by the rent of her house. She had to move out into a nursing home. And guy moves in, stops paying the rent. Took him over a year to get him out, and the lawyer's advice was pay him $5,000 to turn over the keys. So not only did he lose a year's rent, but it cost him $5,000 to get the guy out. And then the damage that he did when he left. You know, something has to happen in this state when it comes to rights of the landlord.
You know, what Bob was just mentioning too is that, and this is very common right now with year-round rentals, is that a friend moves in and they leave. You now have a squatter on the property.
Yeah.
It takes 6 to 9 months to get that person out.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about damages, I have 2 apartments that I could rent at very high rates. I've always kept them affordable for people in Woods Hole or students that are coming in. I have had a few bad tenants over the years.
Yeah.
It's thousands.
Yeah.
You lose 6 to 8 months of rent just to fix it.
And the only one who's ever addressed that was Bill Zammer.
I mean, if you have the money to do it and fix it up, and that's fine, but you're gonna find that, you know, once somebody takes one hit, just somebody just does something wrong, they will never go through it again. Insurance will cover it once.
Yeah.
Actually, it happened to my parents.
Yeah.
They had a summer place in New Hampshire, and they spent the winters here in Falmouth. And for, I think it was like 3 years, we had a friend who would stay in their house for the summer. And then she moved away, she married somebody else, so they gave it to a real estate agent who rented it to somebody who stole things, who walked away with stuff, and didn't pay the last month's rent, which they didn't care about, but it was the mess that they left behind. They never rented it again.
Well, I have a friend that tenant moves out, left the place a mess. He hired someone for $100 to come in, and he deducted that from the security. And she took him to court, and the judge made him pay her not only the money he lost, but doubled it.
3 times though.
Yeah, considering that, and the judge's comment was, well, you've made a profit on this property, so, you know, we can go on forever. I mean, whenever I get on this subject.
But that's for homeowners that know, many homeowners don't know.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're doing anything wrong, they don't know what the law is.
Yeah.
Maybe all we need to do is just, really publicize these bad events.
Yeah.
I mean, you always hear about the landlord from hell, but you never hear about the tenant from hell. Can I say hell on TV and FCTV?
Well, on the plus side, we had a building in Boston that we lived in. It had 4 units. We rented the other 3. And you have to be careful who you rent to. We did it for years.
Yeah.
Worked. It was great.
Yeah.
It bought us a house here. It was worth doing.
I could add to that, but I think you made the point.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not going to get any takers here, but maybe we can figure out a way to move it forward. And Jed had said that, yes, that the assistant town planner is interested in looking into it.
Talks about it on a regular basis.
I didn't hear you.
Oh,
Well, it's on tape, so we'll just watch it afterwards.
and it already been said.
I think just as, you know, by way of an update, and Doug mentioned it previous, interim town manager Peter Johnson stopped. He's asked town council to look into it. Town council's asking for my assistance as well. So we're looking at it from sort of two angles. One, a legal perspective, but also the zoning code. What does the zoning code say currently for rental properties, commercial accommodations, et cetera? What does it currently allow? Where does it allow it? What are the regulations? And then ultimately, I believe we're going to be providing the select board with some information so that they can start talking about policy decisions that they want to make. And then ultimately, would the planning board get involved? Likely. If those policies, decisions end up being zoning amendments, the planning board would likely need to, you know, obviously take that up. But one of the suggestions that we talked about was, you know, we've got a consultant helping us with our zoning bylaw recodification. They may have expertise in short-term rental zoning. So we are likely to reach out to them and see if they have any input that might be helpful. Any examples from other communities like Falmouth, rest of the Cape, et cetera? What are they doing for it, and what are some of the things that they've run
And
into?
what luck have they had with it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So more to come. Lots of reading.
But, you know, could in the end, John's right, maybe this isn't something that's an actual problem that needs to be solved. We'll see. The other thing we wanted to talk about, Sue Moran has been very interested in doing a lot of work on affordable housing, and I think you got a summary and took a look at it. I don't know what we can do to help her, but when you read through that list and see, it would be lovely if all of that passed, wouldn't it? Have you seen these? You must have. Yeah. Did you see it, Rob? Yeah, I mean, it's a great list. She's really done a lot of work on it and come up with some very good things. So if there's some way that we could help her, we're certainly, you know, would be willing to do it.
Identifying the properties.
Uh-huh. Well, it's good to know that that's all happening. And this was good to know also. I don't know if you take a look at it, at the website, the Resilient Woods Hall, and the list of who's working on it and what they're doing with it. They've got some very scary graphics there of how much of that part of town is going underwater.
Yeah, and we're worried about drainage on Main Street.
Yeah, really.
Who's responsible for this group? Why is this here? Who's responsible for this? No
Um,
names or anything on here. I
we
wouldn't-
had to actually go to the website where all the names are. And I think it's the institutions appear to be the main sponsors. Who gave this to us?
It's a collaborative effort, but it's led by the Woods Hole Group, who is doing the analysis for
Yeah.
that. The Resilient Woods Hole is the name of the project. And over the summertime and over the spring, they've held a number of public sessions. But this was correspondence that came into the planning board.
So is it a private group? Is it institutional?
I believe it's a collaborative effort. It's led by a consultant, but it is for the institutions that are down there.
And they're looking to
And the
build a
community at
public-private
large.
partnership,
Yeah.
they
I think-
say.
I think it's kind of interesting. One of the groups there is Gansett. And we all know what happened to that property on Gansett Point. Just wondering what they think about something like that. We turned down the accessory apartment, and now they have a separate building there, a separate entrance, like this whole separate unit. So
Well, and it got turned into a corporate retreat, didn't it?
that's not the way it was proposed.
No, it's not. So, any committee reports? No? Planning department report.
We're getting the band back together on recodification, Phase 2. So we're very excited. We're scheduling a meeting for February 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk zoning. We're basically going to start, you know, where we left off, which was, gosh, it feels like years ago. But we're re-energizing that committee, and we're going to start moving forward on some of the low-hanging fruit that we might have. We took on, as you remember, some municipal use language, and that sort of bogged us down for a little bit. But I think we may transition to some easy lifts that we can start to think about bringing to fall town meeting.
I think we wanted to work on the restaurant section,
Right?
right? I think there's a whole chunk that's missing from the book that ought to be there on procedures. It's just, more that could be there, but that's
Obviously,
starting again.
parking's a big one. I mean, that's part of the discussion we had tonight.
Yeah.
Is that your parking bylaw limits the amount of relief that you can give. In fact, it pretty much doesn't provide much relief that you can provide to an applicant. So it really sort of constrains the planning board.
Well, and they're way over-required.
Yeah.
So,
Point that most of the people who'll be living in Glasgow's building, they're not even gonna have cars.
right. And without an avenue to grant that relief, it's really difficult to work with an applicant like that. So amending that bylaw is really important.
That
Because
is the
people
prime,
can't
I
just-
think.
Not everyone can just ask for a waiver and it be granted,
Yeah.
because some of them in our bylaw, they don't qualify for a reduction.
Yeah.
And that's because the way the bylaw is written. So not anybody can come and say, look, can I have a reduction? You can't just give it to whoever, unfortunately.
You have to follow that through. Supposing you decided, or the board collectively decided, yes, we're going to waive that for that particular project. Who then is going to appeal that?
Well.
What would the consequence of that be?
I mean, anyone could appeal it, because you've essentially violated the bylaw. I mean, the bylaw doesn't provide you the option
They'd
to
have to
do
have
that.
some standing for their
You don't
appeal.
wanna, you also do not want to set a precedence.
So, I mean, it could be in a butter. Let's, to further your argument, in a butter could say, hey, why are you waiving this parking requirement? It sounds crazy, but it could happen. And, the board is supposed to use the bylaw, the rules that are contained in the bylaw to, approve applications, so.
We understand that, the difference
Yeah.
between like what the bylaw says and what you can grant relief for. Maybe it doesn't match up, but unfortunately, until the bylaw changes, that's what we have to go by.
Could I ask a question? So it seems you've got the right to waive the parking for restaurants, right?
Certain restaurants, yes. So the clause in the bylaw basically says, and I'm not quoting it verbatim, but it allows for certain retail, business, and professional uses that you're able to waive parking requirements for. But it doesn't say anything about residential.
But Mr. Galasso has a restaurant.
Correct. So then there's a by right reduction. Unfortunately, the number of seats that he has doesn't qualify for the reduction.
Oh,
It's just shy of that.
okay.
So again, another one of those avenues where we're looking for everything we can, but the bylaw just needs amendment.
It's too bad some of the units couldn't be designated bicycle units only and
Mhm.
not require a parking spot.
And provide the bike.
Yeah.
Paul,
Make a motion, we adjourn.
second?
Oh, wait, we haven't done future agenda items.
I guess we don't have committee reports?
Yeah. Conversion bylaw and the parking bylaw were the two things that
The conversion's gonna be on the next meeting.
okay.
What was the other one you said?
And the parking, we were
Parking.
just talking about.
You guys have done a great job with accessory apartment.
Yeah, yeah.
They're coming along, aren't they?
They are, people seem to be encouraged.
Yeah, really. Too bad they're so expensive to do.
Is there a second?
Okay, Paul.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank
8:30.
you. 8:30.